Lesson 24.1. How orders actually get placed. And why it matters more than you think. Here is something that surprises people the first time they go live with Freqtrade. They spent weeks building a strategy, backtested it, the numbers look great. They flip it to live trading, and the very first trade goes sideways. The signal fires, the bot says it is buying, but then nothing happens. Or the buy goes through, but at a price $10 higher than the signal said. Or worse, the stop loss triggers during a flash crash, and the position closes at a price they've never even seen on the chart. The strategy wasn't wrong. The order placement was the problem. And the uncomfortable truth is that most people treat order placement as a detail. It isn't. It is where your backtest meets reality, and the gap between those two things is measured in money. So in this lesson I want to slow down and actually explain what happens between the moment your strategy says, boy, and the moment you actually own the coin. Because once you understand that, a lot of strange behavior you'll see in live trading suddenly makes sense. The two order types that matter almost everything in spot trading comes down to two flavors of order. Limit and market. Get these straight, and the rest is just variations. A limit order says, I want to buy or sell at this exact price, or better. You specify the price, you specify the quantity, and the exchange puts your order in a queue. It sits there until someone is willing to take the other side at your price, or until you cancel it. The upside is control. If Bitcoin is at 30,500 and you place a limit buy at 30,000 flat, you will never pay more than 30,000. Either you get filled at your price or better, or you don't get filled at all. No surprises, no slippage. The downside is that you might not get filled at all. If the price never drops to 30,000, your order just sits there. In a fast market, that is painful. You watch the coin run 20% while your carefully priced buy order never touches. That is the trade-off. Certainty of price, uncertainty of execution. A market order is the opposite. It says, I don't care about the price, just execute this now. The exchange grabs the best available offers on the book and fills you. The upside is speed and certainty. Your order will execute, basically immediately. The downside is that you don't know what price you'll get until after the fact. That uncertainty has a name, slippage. And I'll come back to it because it is where most of the heartbreak lives. So the simple version is this. Limit when you care about the price, market when you care about the timing. That is the whole mental model. When to use which, let me make this concrete, because in the abstract it sounds obvious. For entries, you usually want limit orders. Your strategy produced a signal at some specific price, and you want to enter close to that price. A limit order at the current bid, or a hair below it, usually gets filled within seconds and gives you a known cost basis. Most Freqtrade strategies use limit entries by default, and that is the right call for almost everyone. For exits, it depends. If you are taking profit on a slow-moving coin, a limit order at your target price is fine. But if you are exiting because something is going wrong, you want a market order. The reason is simple. If your stop loss fires and the price is collapsing, you don't want to be sitting in a queue hoping someone buys your bag at your preferred price. You want out now, whatever it costs. The same logic applies to emergency exits, the kind where you hit the force sell button because something feels wrong. Market order. Every time. Here is a mistake I've seen more than once. Someone configures their stop loss as a limit order because they don't want to lose money to slippage. Then a real crash happens. The price blows straight through their stop, and their limit order just sits there unfilled while the loss keeps growing. By the time they notice, they're down 3 times what they would have lost with a market order that slipped 0.5%. The lesson is that the worst slippage you'll ever see is almost always smaller than the loss you take waiting for a limit order to fill during a real move. As a rule of thumb, entries can be limit, exits under stress should be market. That covers most situations. Stop loss flavors. There are 2 stop loss variants you'll see, and the difference matters. A stop loss market order works in 2 steps. First, you set a trigger price. The order doesn't do anything until the market hits that price. When it does, the order converts into a market sell and executes immediately. The trigger is guaranteed. The fill price is not. In a fast crash, the price where you actually get filled might be noticeably below your trigger. A stop-loss limit order adds a third knob. You set a trigger price, and when the trigger hits, the order becomes a limit order at some price you also specified in advance. So you might trigger at 29,550 and place the limit sell at 29,500. The idea is that you protect yourself from getting a terrible fill during a crash. The catch, as you can probably guess, is the same catch as with regular limit orders. If the price is moving fast enough, your limit might never fill. The exchange doesn't care that you wanted at least 29.5. It just keeps dropping. So stop loss limit is theoretically cleaner, but practically riskier. For most people, stop loss market is the safer default. This is exactly the kind of decision Freqtrade lets you make in the config file. And the default is market for stop loss, which is what you want unless you have a specific reason to change it. How Freqtrade thinks about orders. Freqtrade exposes all of this through a small block in the config called order types. The nice thing is that it lets you set the order type separately for different situations. So you can say entries are limit, normal exits are limit, emergency exits are market, force exits are market. That is the most common setup, and it is what I'd recommend you start with. There is also a flag called stop loss on exchange. And I want to mention this because it trips people up. When this is true, Freqtrade doesn't just hold the stop loss in its own memory and fire a sell when the price drops. It actually places a real stop loss order on the exchange the moment you enter a trade. That order sits on Binance or Bybit or wherever, and if the price hits the trigger, the exchange itself executes it. This is more reliable because it works even if your bot loses internet connection or your server crashes. If you trust the exchange, and for stop losses you generally should, turn this on. There is a related setting that controls how often Freqtrade checks and updates that on-exchange stop loss, as the price moves and your trailing stop adjusts. 60 seconds is the default, and it is fine. Don't set it to 1 second thinking you'll be faster. You'll just hit rate limits and annoy the exchange. The other knob worth knowing is the unfilled timeout. This is how long Freqtrade waits for a limit order to fill before giving up and either cancelling it or converting it to a market order. 10 minutes is a sensible default for entries. If your buy hasn't filled in 10 minutes, the market has moved, and you probably don't want that entry anymore. For exits you might want it shorter because an unfilled exit is a risk you are carrying. Time in force. Briefly, there is one more set of acronyms you'll bump into, so let me explain them once and move on. Time in force, sometimes abbreviated TIF, tells the exchange how to handle your order over time. GTC means good till cancelled. The order sits there until it fills or you cancel it. This is what you want for most limit orders where you are patient. EOC means immediate or cancel. The exchange tries to fill as much as it can right now, and whatever doesn't fill gets cancelled. Useful if you want a partial fill fast and don't want the leftovers sitting around. FOC means fill or kill. Either the entire order fills immediately or nothing happens. You rarely need this in retail trading. For Freqtrade, GTC on both entries and exits is the safe default. If you are running a very fast strategy and getting annoyed by stale orders, you might experiment with IOC on entries, but honestly that is an optimization for later. Don't start there. Slippage and why it eats your backtest. Let me come back to slippage, because it is the single biggest reason live results disappoint versus backtests. When you backtest, every trade fills at the exact price the strategy expects. The signal fires at 30,000. You buy at 30,000 clean. In reality, when you place a market buy for any meaningful size, you eat into the available sell orders on the book. The first chunk fills at the best price. The next chunk fills at a slightly worse price. The next chunk at a worse price still. By the time your order is fully filled, your average price is higher than the ticker said when you clicked buy. That gap is slippage, and it is worse on small coins, worse on big orders, and much worse during volatility. The same market order that slips $5 on a calm Tuesday can slip $50 during a breakout. You can't eliminate slippage entirely, but you can manage it. Use limit orders when you can, especially on less liquid pairs. Keep your position sizes reasonable relative to the coin's daily volume. If you are trading a coin that does $1 million a day in volume, and you try to enter with a $100,000 order, you are going to move the market against yourself. That is not slippage anymore, that is you being the market. And watch your actual fills. After a few weeks of live trading, look at the difference between what your strategy expected to pay and what it actually paid. If you are seeing 0.5% slippage on average, that is money coming straight out of your edge. A strategy that backtests at 1% profit per trade might be barely break, even in reality once slippage and fees are taken into account. This is why paper trading exists, and why going from backtest to live in small size is so important. When orders don't fill, the other common headache is the unfilled limit order. You placed a buy, the price came close but not quite, and now you are sitting there with an open order while the market runs away from you. The first thing to check is how far off your order price is from the current market. If your buy is sitting 1% below the current price, it is basically never going to fill unless the market dips. If it is 0.1% below, it'll probably fill on the next little wiggle. The size of the gap tells you what to do. Freqtrade's unfilled timeout handles the easy cases automatically. If an order has been opened past the timeout, the bot cancels it and either resubmits at a better price or gives up depending on your config. That is good. What you don't want is to be manually poking at orders every 5 minutes, because that way lies emotional trading. There is a tactical question of what to do when an order is partially filled and the rest is sitting there. The honest answer is that for retail-sized trades on liquid pairs, this rarely matters. Partial fills are mostly a problem when your order is big enough to matter to the order book. If you are hitting that, you probably want to split your order into pieces. But that is an advanced optimization and not something most people need. A note on configuration profiles. You'll sometimes see people share config snippets online, labeled conservative or aggressive or balanced. And I want to explain what those actually mean so you can choose intelligently instead of copying. A conservative setup uses limit orders for entries and exits, with longer timeouts. The philosophy is patience. You'd rather miss a trade than overpay for one. This is good for trend-following strategies where the difference between getting in at 30,000 and 30,050 doesn't change the thesis, and where the hold time is long enough that a few minutes of waiting doesn't matter. An aggressive setup uses limit entries but market exits, with short timeouts and IOC time in force. The philosophy is execution first. You'd rather pay a small premium to make sure you are in and out when the signal fires. This suits faster strategies, scalping approaches, anything where being late by 5 minutes turns a winning trade into a loser. A hybrid setup uses limit everywhere, even for stop losses, in exchange for tighter price control. I'd be careful with this one. As I said earlier, stop loss limit orders can fail to fill exactly when you need them most. It is a defensible choice if you are trading very liquid assets, and you've thought hard about the worst case, but it is not where I'd start. For most people starting live trading, the conservative profile is right. Use limits for entries and normal exits, market for stop losses and emergencies. 10 to 15 minute timeouts. GTC time in force. Get 100 trades under your belt that way. Then look at your data. See where you are losing money to slippage or to missed fills, and adjust from evidence rather than from theory. What to actually take from this? The thing I want you to leave with is that order placement isn't a detail. It is the last inch between your strategy and the market, and a lot of edge lives or dies in that inch. Limit orders give you price control at the cost of maybe not getting filled. Market orders give you guaranteed execution at the cost of an uncertain price. Stop losses should almost always be market orders, because the failure mode of a limit stop in a real crash is much worse than a little slippage. Slippage is the tax you pay for urgency, and the size of that tax depends on the coin, the size of your order, and the volatility at the moment you trade. Freqtrade gives you clean knobs for all of this in the config file. Set them deliberately. Understand why each one is set the way it is, and revisit them once you have live data to look at. Don't copy a config blindly, and don't optimize speculatively. Trade small, measure everything, and let the results tell you what to change. That is this lesson. In the next one, we'll dig deeper into stop losses specifically, including trailing and dynamic stops, because once you've got order placement straight, the next lever you have for managing risk is how and where you draw the line that gets you out of a losing trade.